And against? Carried. Right, let's move along to the Auckland Transport Quarterly Report. Remember, this is a look backwards, and just so we're clear, we don't get the monthly update today because it is quarterly report month. Trudy. Oh, and just before I go on, we need to stop using the term Project K. Project K is an outstanding and wonderful project from the Graham Dingle Foundation and should not be confused with what's going on in Karangahape Road. So let's just call it something else. I'm sure we can.
It's called
it's actually I'm sure people have got all sorts of names for it. So anything but Project K.
Well, it's Special K.
Righty-ho.
Chair, it's actually called the Karangahape Neighbourhood Project.
Oh, that's
it
way
gets
too
shortened
long.
all the time to something else.
Okay, so there you go. So never to be uttered again in this unless we're talking about Graham Dingle's awesome program, which I think you benefited from, Richard Hills. So, Trudy.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers Auckland Transport's performance for Q3, so the period from January to March. There were solid results against their performance measures, and the organisation met or exceeded targets for 18 of their 23 SOI measures. There were particularly strong results for public transport reliability and punctuality, road resurfacing and cycle movements. Procurement spend with Māori-owned businesses has improved and is now meeting the 3% target. Just turning to those targets which were not met, following a period of a lower rate of serious road harm in early 2024, there's been a return to high levels of deaths and serious injuries on Auckland's roads. While there have been improvements in customer perception results, with the result up from 27% to 33% in the quarter, the annual result remains below target. Patronage on public transport remains below target, largely due to lower bus patronage than forecast. And occupancy on rapid and frequent transport networks is also below target. And Auckland Transport note that their investigations are underway to understand the causes of lower occupancy on some of their routes. 37 of the 40 deliverables in the SOI are on track or completed, and there's a good summary within Auckland Transport's report on the highlights there. Just noting those not on track, that's growth of non-rates revenue is unfavourable. That's based on lower PT patronage and lower parking revenue than forecast, and lower enforcement revenues due to high compliance across the network. And then while the result isn't included in this quarterly report, Auckland Transport are signalling their emissions reduction against target is also noted as at risk due to the increase in bus services and greater use of rail replacement buses because of some of the extended closures. Looking at financials, Auckland Transport's year-to-date surplus from operations, excluding depreciation, is 44 million favourable to budget. This favourable variance is driven primarily by lower operating expenditure, which more than offsets that revenue shortfall from PT and parking enforcement revenue. Capital expenditure in the year-to-date is 879 million, which is tracking at 90% of the planned spend. As sought by the council, Auckland Transport have now included milestone tracking in their capital program. So, for example, they report that the kilometres of cycleways completed exceeds plan, but also note that the number of safety improvement projects delivered is behind schedule. So, Chair, that's my sort of a summary introduction to the report, and I note that Dean Kimpton and his executive team members are here to answer any questions on their performance.
Thank you, Trudy. So before we hook into questions for team, someone like to move? Thank you, Chris. Second. Thanks, Wayne. Okay, so Scotty and Dean, and I think Dean does have to slip away at some stage potentially.
Questions, first up, Desley. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Auckland Transport. My first question is around DSIs. I don't think I'd be alone around the table when I'm concerned that our DSI figures have increased. I suppose the good news is that the serious injuries have gone down. But I want to ask you, please, if you could give us any additional insights as to the specifics of what's really happening with DSIs. You mentioned in the paper you mention a risk that Auckland Transport cannot deliver safety infrastructure, and I think I quote, the upward pressure of external factors. I'm going to ask you to be more specific around that, and if you could help us understand exactly what the background to this is, please.
Thank you for that question, Councillor, and I'm going to refer it to Simon Buxton, who leads, and amongst other things, the Transport Safety Team. He'll be able to respond.
And just to my colleagues, I actually sent it through in advance, so
Yes.
these guys were prepared for it.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you for the question and the observations. As acknowledged earlier in the meeting by some councillors, we are focused on a safe transport network, and to explain what's going on with the DSIs, 2024 had really low numbers of fatalities, so there was a really low base. And in 2025 we have seen an upturn in fatalities, but a decrease in serious injuries, as you say. Some of the reasons for that and what's hinted at in the commentary that you referred to is around, there's a few things going on. So we're applying our own rules on the arterials, so we can't go into the arterials as much to put in interventions. That's caused a little delay because we're trying to keep networks moving. We're trying to make sure we've got local board approval and buy-in to some of the things we're putting in. And also some of the primary interventions, we're not funded the same way for NZTA anymore. So there's a few things going on that are meaning there's a little bit of a delay to some of the implementation of the safety measures. And also the way we report is obviously here on a sort of yearly basis, looking at the trends. So that's why you can see the difference between 2024 and 2025. We also do look at things over a sort of 5-year period as well. So there's just a few different things going on there. We're very focused on it. What we don't have yet, because there's a bit of lag in the data, is the reasoning for, say, more crashes and more fatalities. We're looking into that now, and I'll happily come back to this committee with the analysis and the reasons to the trend.
Okay, thank you. Supplementary to that, because what I'm trying to ascertain is an increase of DSIs is because of just pure accidents or because of lack of safety initiatives. I'll make it quite specific. That's my question.
So there is an increase in, I don't have all the analysis because there's a lag time, but there's an increase in crashes. We're trying to understand the reasoning behind that, but there is also a lag time to a delay to some of the interventions we're putting in for the 3 reasons I outlined.
Okay, I'll wait for that further detail then.
Councillor, can I just add in, we've done some further analysis in a recent Auckland Transport Board report. What we have observed, and I'll communicate this to all of you because I think you'll find it interesting. In 2004, the DSI number was circa 580. In 2024, it's circa 580. What we've seen over that 20-year period has gone up and down, and it varies annually for a whole range of reasons. At the same time that the DSI has done that, and pretty much 20 years later, still at the same number, which we don't accept. The population has grown from 1.2 million to 1.7. So we have seen the impact of our investment, whether it's through policing, drug and alcohol enforcement, whether it's through reduction in speed, infrastructure, has meant that the per 100,000 population number has, I can't quite remember, I did the calculation, it might have dropped from 52 per 100,000 to about 32 per 100,000. You can do the numbers. But look, the impact of all that investment over time has actually been of great benefit to the population on a per 100,000 basis. The stubborn part we're really struggling with is how to bring the actual number further down. And I think, you know, that's what we're trying to unpack, and that's what we're very focused on working through with you all.
I think that's a really important thing, and with respect, I think you should highlight that more in your paper, because the fact that I'm asking is it's probably not as clear. So thank you. Yeah, Yeah, sorry. My second question is, I'm getting a bit of pushback on what Hamilton City Council are doing and Dunedin City Council are doing around trying to find, for want of a better word, cracks in the legislation or ways of keeping safer speeds, especially around schools. So my question to you, and I acknowledge, I don't know whether he's still here, the Chair of Auckland Transport, Richard Leggett, who has written to the Minister and copied us all in for clarity about that. But could you please tell me what legal advice you've had as to whether Auckland Transport has the ability to do what two other councils appear to be doing, and if not, and if it can't, why not, and what is the difference?
So we have looked at the speed rule several times just to make sure we properly understand its intent and its requirements of us as an RCA. And we're satisfied with our interpretation. We may not like it, but we believe from a legal perspective we have properly interpreted the rule and its intent. We're also fully aware of what both Hamilton and Dunedin City Councils have done. Our legal teams have talked to their legal teams, we've looked at that advice and we've looked at its application, and our legal advice continues to be the same, that our interpretation of the rule as it relates to Auckland, whether we agree it or not, if a school was the primary or a reason for the change in speed under our Safe Speeds program, then it needs to revert back to 50 kilometres. We cannot see a way of not complying, irrespective of the guidance that we might want to consider what both of those councils have done. So we're left in this position where we believe we've got a proper interpretation and we're acting on that. What we are doing though, because that's not the end of the story, what we are doing is we are developing internally a program which we will at the right time bring back through the local boards, asking them to identify those communities in their areas that would like to commence engagement on different speeds. So if it was 50, they can only bring it back to 40 because 30 is no longer an option. So we will work with communities through local boards to identify where those opportunities arise. And of course, we will work with the councillors around this table in your ward council capacity.
Could you just confirm for me the timing around that?
I don't want to give you a specific time. We're working on the program right now, so I'd expect over the next month we will be able to come back and say this is what the engagement process is.
2025?
That's my expectation, is that we will be able to come back and tell you what definitely over the next month we'll have a view on what that program looks like and how we would roll it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lottie.
Kia ora, thanks Chair, and thanks Auckland Transport for your report. You know, some good news in there as well. Yes. Now, of course, safety is a huge concern for you as it is for us, and we've had a few issues recently about safety for our, you know, public transport users, and in particular in my ward in Papatoetoe, there was an incident on Sunday. Just wondering if there's an update on what happened there. I appreciate the letter we got from Stacey about that on the 2nd of May, but yeah, just keen to know.
We will invite Stacey to give you an update on that because she is across the detail. Thank you, Stacey, who I presume heard the question.
I did, thank you. Look, at this stage, I'm sure everybody respects this too, there is little we can say in terms of the additional information, given that it is part of a police investigation. And what we've done, I guess, in terms of making sure that you know, driver had the appropriate training, credentials, of course, you know, being supplied with de-escalation training and things like that. And so we have done that to make sure, and also made sure that they have other services available to them as they go through their process too, in terms of access to EAP and the likes. Yeah.
And just, is there anything being offered as well to the family of the deceased in terms of, I don't know, counselling or something? Is that part of that, or do you have to wait until the process has happened with the police.
Yeah, we do have to wait until that process has happened. What we did do over the weekend was we did have a group of people go out and talk to the community and just, understand what's happening in that area, between the train station and those bus stops and the sort of local businesses, and provide some sort of reassurance and assurance in terms of public transport and its safety for the community. With that, there was a lot of really good learnings too, and so I'm waiting on a full rundown of that, but also in terms of linking people to other agencies, because there's some pretty complex issues out in our communities, as we know, but making sure they know what's available to them to support them, that's definitely been a priority.
Kia ora. Thank you, I appreciate that. And Councillor Alf and I, as well as the local board, are here to support any mahi in that space. Kia ora.
Thanks, Lottie. And just not a controversial thing on account, just on the SOI period of AI, AD. So yeah, just make sure we're focusing on the quarterly report, not the SOI. I'm scarred for life. Shane.
That's okay, says Councillor Newman. Yeah, kia ora, just a couple of cues, just bringing them up. Okay, first and foremost, point 25 in the Māori impact statement around bilingual announcements. It's gone from 25% to 48, which, it's good to see some progress there. But I'm just wondering, for trains, why not just roll it out tomorrow? Why are we at 48? Why aren't we at 100?
Great question, Councillor. A couple of things to note, particularly with announcements, is the space between stops, right? And so, with this, we are having complaints in terms of people who are continuously have this noise in their ear because we're always doing announcements. Trying to find the sweet spot with that, and also the upgrade in terms of the software that we use in the EMUs has been challenging, so that's sort of being addressed at the same time. So we will continue on, it is progress. And in terms of that, we do have, obviously, the majority of our services across the network do have bilingual announcements now.
Thank you. And just to follow up, as part of that program, we're also looking at things like signage where we can, things like that. Cool. Fantastic. That's awesome. I got a couple more. So I actually asked this question in the workshop yesterday, but I'm wondering if you've got any insights into the lower than expected public transport patronage. Is that falling evenly across the city? Is it falling evenly across age groups? Or is there some sort of problem hidden in the data there?
No real problem as such. There's a couple of things. So when you sort of look at it from a modal basis, obviously buses are a couple of points below, but not hugely. Yeah, it is majority coming from rail, which I'm sure we can all understand has had, substantial impacts in terms of viability of service from a customer perspective over a very extended period of time. And so that's really has impacted, given, we have had a lot of closures across the network. Ferry hasn't recovered either in terms of it. It is still down in comparison to bus. And that is largely due to, obviously, ferry is a point-to-point service. And often you've got pretty established communities. There's only a few what I'll call growth communities there where more people are entering the sort of market and wanting to travel. And so when you've got a limited base and people are still working flexibly post-COVID, you need more people to use the service in order to get back to the same numbers. And so that is definitely what we're seeing. In terms of age groups, and I think I said this previously, we have seen a drop in child users. And I largely think that's got to do with trust and confidence in terms of safety of the network with what we've seen over the last year and, a large media attention on the topic. So that has changed quite dramatically over a year since the half price fares came off. Uni students are up. Yeah, and they've had a really good lift this year. So there's unders and overs in terms of what we're seeing.
Just in terms of the child fares, this is interesting. So them dropping, and you've said that safety might be an issue, but would it be fair to say that the fares are the major cause there? Because you change a fare price, all of a sudden you see a pretty immediate response from the market. Would it be fair to say that if that were to be subsidised, then we would go back to previous figures, those kinds of things?
It wasn't an immediate change. Yeah, so that was the interesting thing. There was a gradual decline, and so I think again, there's a couple of things. Of course, throughout the end of last year, we had a few sort of really terrible incidents on public transport. And this is front and centre of parents' minds, right, in terms of the safety of public transport. We saw a lot of issues in terms of particular youth elements across the network, which we worked really hard to resolve, but it's a constant watch area that we're working on and trying to support our communities with. The other thing I think is too, as unemployment sort of has risen, of course there's potential for a parent to be at home and getting through the children to school through another means. So there's different things there.
And also cost of living pressure on fares when people lose money. Thank you. I've got two more. They're about DSI, and it's just kind of picking up on that comparison of 2004 to now. It's really good to kind of put these figures in context, and I'm just wondering if we do have a context, not just in terms of the historical figure of the city, because that jumped up pretty high in 2017, and then has sort of fallen back down again. Do you have a context on our figure in relation to comparable cities around the world or around the country?
Not at hand, but and Stacey might have comment on this, but traditionally New Zealand's underperformed, so our stats are worse than what the global average is around other cities. So that's why we're not satisfied with where we're at, okay? But can I give you the number? No, I can't. Sorry, Councillor, at this point.
That's cool. Yeah, it's a bit unreasonable for me to ask for a figure specifically, but I appreciate the advice. Yeah, and the other thing, just in terms of that comparison, were you aware of the increase in public transport boardings in that time? And would you consider the public transport investment to be a primary measure to improve safety?
Yes.
Good. I have figures, but I didn't need to ask that question. Fantastic. Thank you, Chair.
All good. Honey.
Kia ora. Last month you introduced your report, E Marotiri Ano, and it showed some good results in terms of the Auckland transport delivery to Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau. The procurement space, correct me if I'm wrong, was 3.8%, but you've recorded it, I'm hearing at 3%. I'm just wanting to know an explanation why that is.
We know that we're tracking here of so we, as far as we're tracking, sorry, Mr. Chair, I think there's feedback, tracking well ahead on what spend will be, and we are really confident that we'll be above that 3% figure at the year end. So as far as the 3.8 versus the 3%, I don't have that off the top of my head. I can come back to you on it.
Just a follow-on quick, and it follows through, I suppose, because what I had in my head was 3.8, and with the SOI, just previous conversation, it's targeted at 3%, yet if I've misheard or if you've excuse 3.8, because it's still a need to 4%. I must have missed the head.
I can actually clarify, Chair, through you. It was previously 3.08% rather than 3.8%.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris Dubby.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Dean and team. Dean, you referred to the letter that AT Chair Richard Leggett proactively wrote to the Minister, I think it was dated last day of April, where he seeks clarification of a public comment that the Minister made that the setting a speed limit rule does allow for retaining the 30k speed limit where there is community support, and pretty much he's used those words. That letter's gone out. I think it's a reply will be forthcoming to the AT Chair. Would it be helpful if the chair of this committee or the mayor wrote on behalf of Auckland Council a similar question, if not the same question, to actually seek the clarification politically? At the moment, the clarification is being sought by Auckland Transport. Would it be helpful that that was also a political request for clarification on the public comments made by the Minister?
It already has, and so as we discussed at a workshop or at a previous meeting, I wrote and the answer is currently sitting with the ministry. So they haven't had a response, and as of yesterday, the ministry was considering a response. So the political question has already it's been worked on, the letter with the Mayor's office, and was done some time ago, as we had discussed previously.
Sorry, we discussed it. Was that distributed, that one? No, look, I'm interested, was that letter distributed so that we were all aware of what the question was?
Saying. I don't know, it might have been. I will get it out to you, to everyone, Chris, if that's right. I'm still waiting on a response, but yep, I'll get it to you. So there's been some written, so we'll put them all together and come up with a compendium of letters.
So the key question was, similar to Chair Richard Leggett's question, was it? The public comment of the Minister was the rule does allow. Was your question seeking clarification of the comment from the Minister that it does allow, where there is public support, to retain the 30k limit?
The point of my letter was requesting that Auckland Transport be afforded the same ability to make change to speed limits as NZTA was given, and my letter was sent in conjunction with the Mayor's office and an advice from Auckland Transport to cover off a specific thing.
Yeah, that's a different question. So
no, so it didn't ask that question. It asked the question I just said it was.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's a good question to ask. I'm actually referring very specifically to the public comment of the Minister of Transport that the rule does allow roading authorities, councils, etc., to retain the 30k speed limit where there is public support. I think that is a different question, is it not?
So, Dean, my understanding is, and I was going to ask the question anyway, so it might be the time to ask it, is it not part of the problem that we encounter in Auckland is in terms of the way in which we did our initial consultation in regards to when the speed limits were originally changed?
Look, a couple of quick comments. There was no problem with how we initially consulted. We did the right thing, okay? The speed rule has changed the settings and said that if a school was a reason, you can't do it. Well, I can't think of a better reason for actually addressing speed in the first place. But put that to one side. I don't want people to think we did the wrong thing. We did the right thing at the time. In terms of whether the Minister, through parliamentary question time, my take is, and there was more in that conversation as I understand it, my take is he's provided a personal comment, but that comment doesn't change the speed rule itself or the law. So what we've done is we have gone back and said, you've made these comments, can you please clarify them? For the avoidance of doubt, and I'm semi-quoting here, if that is your view, it may require a change to the speed rule. Can you please confirm if you're willing to amend? And so we've asked the question in the nature in that way. If it was felt by this committee that you could add weight to the letter that we've written by picking it up and following up to see how the Minister or the Ministry of Transport in turn is going, then that's your call. But that letter is in with the Minister and with the Ministry as we speak. We know that. We have followed up as well, and we're putting urgency on it. So to the extent that we get an urgent response, I'm not sure, but that is, we're pushing as hard as we can to get the clarification. The Minister's comments in parliamentary question time does not change the law. That's the issue.
Okay. I don't think there's comments that are personal or ministerial comments. He made it in the capacity as the Minister of Transport. But look, that's not important. But Chair, I appreciate the questions you've raised, but what I'm pointing out is actually a different question, and it's a really important question. And so I'm actually asking you whether you would maybe speak to Dean and the Chair of AT with view to another question that you, as Chair of this committee for us, could ask for clarification.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Daniel.
Yeah, look, thank you very much for the report. just a couple of comments from me. The asset condition, you made reference to the previous assessment for being very conservative, suggested that the condition of PT assets were worse than observed in the field. Can you just explain that? Because I'm not quite sure what happened. We went out there and had another look and said, oh, it's actually not that bad after all.
Right, we've got Murray who will answer that just superbly.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And that specifically applies to ferry wharves where there's routine inspections that are done from landside, and then we also do inspections from the water. And once the inspections are done from the water, we often find that the condition might have changed more rapidly than we expected. So that's in relation to that.
But the wording here suggests that on further inspection, I see exactly. All right. You're on track to complete your resurfacing and rehabilitation by the end of the financial year. I mean, we are in more challenging weather now compared to the summer period. So, are we on target?
Yeah, correct. We're on target for the road resurfacing, and at this time of year we move into asphalt works, which are less susceptible to weather change. The chip sealing's mostly done over the summer months.
Thanks, Daniel. Richard.
Thank you. First, this is just a question. I think I can't remember who asked it, but Dean, your comments on 2004. I just want to this year's DSI is what, 589, but you chose to choose one of the higher years, and the whole point of Vision Zero was this: we had this massive drop down to 4 something. The baseline, I think, between 2009 and 2013 was 480, and then it went skyrocketed to 700 or 800 in 2017 and 18. And so I guess I'm just trying to be careful with celebrating some numbers, because the purpose of Vision Zero was because I think we were the fastest place in the whole country for rising DSI, and that's why Vision Zero came about. So can you just maybe clarify the 2004 figure is actually above nearly every year after that, until we had this massive rise between 13 and 18?
Look, I wasn't trying to hide anything. I'm just saying that over a 20-year period it's gone up and down. Yes, I've got the graph in front of me. 2004 was the low, was sitting just above 400. 2012, wasn't it? Circa 2012 was the low, and then we had a significant high come, as you say, 2017, 2018. I'm just saying, all that investment, we've seen these ups and downs, we've seen some big troughs and big spikes, and here we are 20 years later at the same number. That was simply my point. And yes, we're deeply committed to Vision Zero, as you put it, although that's now not a government target. It is still our objective to reduce the actual number of people that are being killed or injured. So I'm agreeing with you, Councillor.
Yeah. I just kind of... So my question on that is, and to Desley's point, and I know the Chair wants us to talk about the performance, but it is kind of part of that because the changes are happening in it. So can we, whether it's Chair again, like Councillor Darby said, or CEO or Chair of AT, we're on record still, 18 votes to 3 that we supported the speed staying as they were, and then I think it was 10-10 on the school stuff, but Councillor Watson at the time used his chair vote to support that. Can we reiterate those on the record resolutions? I know the school one was 10-10, so very tight, but both are still on the record that we supported keeping them. Can we write in the letter, because I've heard too, the Minister Bishop is happy if we can prove an area still wants it to stay, that it can stay. So is there I'm just worried that we are wasting money, but also if there is a loophole, how do we get that sense? If the Minister is happy and we are happy and the community is happy, can we just align those things? It may not be in every area, but it just seems wild that we could end up spending 6 months reversing things and then we get told, oh yeah, I told you guys it was sweet as to keep them in place.
At this stage, we don't think there's a loophole. So I have to go with our legal advice on this. We're looking for a loophole. Everybody's desperately searching, asking for us to find a loophole that we haven't been able to find. How Hamilton City and Dunedin City have interpreted it in their particular circumstances, they've been able to do something at specific locations that we have interpreted under the law that we cannot. And so I don't want to give false hope here, and I've tried to be very consistent with any of you as councillors or the community where you've asked me this question. I think everybody's sentiment is aligned, but the law, as it's written, that speed rule is not aligned with sentiment. So if you're going to lean on anything, you've got to write to the minister and ask them to consider what amendments they will make to allow Auckland Transport exercise the same discretion with their communities about keeping the speed as it was. That's the thing you have to go through and do. I can't see another way of handling it. We need the rule changed.
Okay. So we can't leave it until we find that out.
Well, I think the only insight we'll get is when the minister or the ministry replies to the letter we've written saying, are you willing to amend it? If they're not willing to amend it, then the status quo prevails and we need to comply with the law.
Okay. This next question's for Stacey. Sorry, Stacey. Just on the public transport figures, I know there is a massive issue with, it's good that it's better than last year, but obviously we're not hitting those targets. On the days, and I think I did ask this last time, on the days we have the rail open, are we hitting the targets? You know, because these ups and downs on a yearly figure will always be down if we have the rail closed for weeks on end. Are we seeing confidence in the public transport system when we have those days? And are we still increasing the number of people? We know that there's a big drop off on a Friday, but are the number of people using the system overall still increasing?
Yes, I mean, if I sort of look across the last week after being back from school holidays, there's definitely improvement on last year in terms of numbers, albeit, you know, only small sort of numbers. There has been a gradual decline in terms of once you see with these big rail shuts, getting people back to using train services with frequency, and that trust has been eroded, and that's what we're dealing with in terms of the train network. Will it return? Absolutely. I think reliability has been really good this year, actually, on train services in comparative to previous years when it is running, which is really good. And actually, public transport performance through March is the best it has ever been in a March. It was really well managed, which brought obviously a lot of confidence, and we expect that to support better patronage throughout the remainder of the year, because that's when a lot of people are making their travel decisions in those February and March. But fundamentally, these rail closures are hurting us, but we need to continue the path we're on so we can have that frequent, reliable network once we integrate with CRL. But it has damaged that trust and confidence.
Thank you. And last question, and I'm not sure if it's for Stacey, but obviously it's connected. The two examples, Monday, Tuesday this week on the North Shore, and I'm sorry to be local, Chair, but it's consistent with across the city. We had truck breakdowns on the bridge, which created the most traffic I've ever seen on both days, and I gave up on Tuesday when I walked up the road and it said my 8 o'clock bus was actually the 6:45 bus waiting somewhere. Anywhere there wasn't a bus lane or a transit lane, the public transport system was completely screwed. And there have been a number of times where I've asked for just quick wins. It might be a clearway in the morning, or it might be yellow lines, and I'm sure other councillors are having that. And it seems to just take forever when sometimes it might help that bus and give that confidence on a massively disruptive day like that, where all the buses are just stuck in general traffic. Like, people were messaging me saying, why have you cancelled all the buses? And I was like, they are all stuck once they got to Oniwa Road, or the busway itself was free flowing, but there was no way to get to the motorway in a bus or a car. Is there, how can we speed those kind of changes? I don't know.
These are I guess, the big conversations we need to keep having with our NZTA colleagues in terms of prioritisation of buses on the network, and we're having another one now currently about the 12, and people who are aware of the changes with that service being upgraded too, that it's had with the punctuality challenges due to the motorway itself. So yes, these are the conversations that we continue to have. We do work really well together in terms of that, but there's not an easy trade-off for some of these conversations as well. So yes, we would love more support in these conversations in terms of how we do that, even if it is on a pop-up disruption type basis. But they're trying to balance their assets as well in terms of how they use them. Yeah.
Karen?
That was fast. Okay. Look, I'm just referring to the DSI as well, sorry, and just looking at the 26% reduction in alcohol-related DSI. Just wanted to raise the night bus and the comms that you have around that, because I'm probably one of those people that wasn't aware. I mean, I lived in the UK for a long time, and the night buses in London are really popular, and obviously we've got that option here in Auckland too. Just wondering if we do have a really big comms strategy around pushing that a little bit more, especially with our young people in Auckland.
It's a great point, Councillor. I'll take that away in terms of particularly with night services, because we have increased obviously a lot of frequency, and I heard 42 before. We've actually got 43 frequent routes now since post Anzac weekend, so which is great. We have got campaigns coming out that are promoting the frequent network. So I mean, a lot of people are still unaware about the huge uplift we've had on that frequent network over the last few years in order to be able to offer Aucklanders a turn up and go type service. So that is one thing that we're really going to be focusing on over the next while, and so making sure people know that they have that available to them, because it's good, and it works. But night services, yes, I take your point on in terms of talking to the team about that.
Yeah, and just another comment, just whether we would ever look at working with our hospitality industry, to kind of look at people spending more money in the city centre, obviously, and knowing that that there's an opportunity for them to catch a night bus afterwards.
Yes, absolutely. These are the type of initiatives we have lined up in order to make sure we maximise both in terms of what's happening in the city and taking that into consideration, as well as other precincts across Auckland. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, looking around. No, Julie.
Sorry, I did put my hand up, but no one was looking, so I thought I'd wait until you were looking. Kia ora. Right, thank you. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, congrats on no March Madness. Yes. This is the first March I can remember where we did not have March Madness on Dominion Road or Mount Eden Road. Sorry if anyone else had it and their part, but I didn't see any media coverage either. Do we have any insights as to how that was achieved? Because that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's being very deliberate about planning for that starting in November. Yeah, in terms of particularly working with schools, right? Because every year we have this real challenge in terms of students travelling out of zone to different areas and understanding where roles are and how people are moving about. So a really big focus on that towards the end of last year, working with schools, understanding where we're going to need additional capacity. There was a lot that was put on at the start of the school year to support that. Yep. There was also, we had a number of buses to be able to put on standby in particular areas where we saw them spike up, that we could actually deploy, and some of those became permanent. So it was about that proactive management. There was daily stand-ups from February with the ops team, as well as conversations, group conversations with all the operators about what they were seeing and what was being reported, so that it could be proactively managed. And it paid off, and I'm glad you saw that it wasn't chaos. Yeah,
well done. Encourage that approach with other areas where we have those kinds of spikes that we can foresee. I also had some questions around, I did have some questions around the safer speed stuff and whether we had a response yet from the Minister. It sounds like we haven't. I think that's been clarified. But I wanted to understand a bit better about how that impacts with the timeframes on rolling out these changes. Because it sounds to me like we're waiting on a response from the Minister. And you will have notified now, because you had to do it, I think, by the 1st of May, the list of streets. Have you released that list publicly? I haven't seen it. If you have, and apologies if I've missed it. Where are we up to with that sort of the public part of that conversation?
So, Councillor, just in regards to the Minister's response, you're correct. We haven't had one yet, other than the usual acknowledgement that one has been received. So that's the first answer to your question.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Dean said, until the speed law changes, we're focused on implementing the law, notwithstanding our sentiments as discussed. And on your second question, apologies if I misheard it as I walked up to the table, we have published on our website all the locations where we would need to reverse the speed limit. Was that the question?
Well, the question was, when will the list be public if it isn't already? And
As far as I'm
if I've missed
aware,
it.
apologies to interrupt. As far as I'm aware, they're all on the website now, but I'll
Okay.
double check. But we can maybe share the link to go out in the minutes.
So that's just to clarify, that's been updated based on, because I understand there are 2 areas that have been removed. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's always the latest position.
Okay.
So we are updating it all the time with the latest interpretation and the latest position. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I will have a look at that. I would just note that, to be parochial for a second, that I have a group in my area who haven't had a response from AT to a letter that they sent about it. So to make that a more general question, Chair, how is AT doing with going with the responses from parts of our community who are saying, actually, we want to keep it, given that we may have an indication from the Minister that there could be some wiggle room? How is AT going about responding to those queries?
So notwithstanding the conversations that's been had so far, we're getting a number of queries about particular locations, and we're providing the consistent messaging that we've summarised in this committee so far. And then if people ask about particular local roads, we're putting in a status update and a map and the reasoning of our interpretation of the law as it stands now.
Okay.
And if we've missed some, apologies,
Yeah.
I'll look into that. We are getting a number of queries and we're trying to turn them around quickly. And if we've missed one, I'll chase that today.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful for the local board and the ward council to be copied in on those replies, so that we're aware that they have been responded to, if that's possible. And then I have another question, which is about the customer perception stuff. So one of the things I'm sort of struggling with in this space around the customer perceptions, and there's a lot of things that contribute to the poor reputation that AT has. And I have mentioned before, I think some of the language and the public comments that some of us in the room make sometimes contribute to that too. Putting that to one side, we had a presentation earlier about karangahape neighbourhoods, if I use the right term. I think that's the right term, yes. And we've also having this conversation about safer speeds. And it seems to me that in both of those cases we have some examples where the way that AT is responding isn't necessarily increasing trust and confidence. And so I wondered if there are any reflections in that customer perception piece of work, which I think is really important. Is there some reflection happening about how those kinds of processes, some of the public dialogue that happens and how AT engages in that, may be counterproductive to increasing that customer perception rating?
I can start, Councillor, and then maybe Simon can jump in from a customer point of view as well. The first one is the acknowledgement of it, absolutely, and we would agree that we need to be more responsive and faster to customer queries and to I guess, responses that the community are asking for. We are in the process of putting into practice the AT way, which I think had been briefed on previously, and expanding that to more of an end-to-end process. So it was originally looking at communications and engagement, but it's actually going across the whole of the organisation and the way that we interact and engage with communities and local boards, yourselves, and other key stakeholders. So we've put a real focus on that. We know that it's the little things in particular that matter to people, and they're the ones that really frustrate people. And so Dean makes a real point of that internally as well too. We are, one of our accelerators, our work streams internally is around every interaction counts, and that has a real focus on that customer engagement and in particular the responsiveness to any sensitive or urgent queries going back. So I think in answer to your first part of your question, we know it's an issue. We do definitely have a laser-like focus on it, and it's something that we are internally holding ourselves to account on each and every day. We might not get it right all the time, but we are on the journey to be better at it. Do you want to add?
I mean, just to echo what Scott said, we're constantly always focused on quick response, the right response, listening to communities, involving local boards more, and we're also working on a customer strategy plan internally to make sure we're better using the data and the insights we have to play them into the projects and the investments. So we're trying harder. We know we've got work to do, and acknowledge your point.
So thank you. I guess a follow-up on that, just to say some of this isn't about the customer says there's a pothole, it hasn't been fixed. Some of this is about the democratic processes and the transparency of consultation. And one of the things that was raised with us from the Greater Auckland presentation was that people thought that they'd reached an end point and then it's being relitigated again. So some of that is about that. So is there, in the AT way, which yes, I was briefed on, but it was quite a while ago, so it might be timely for an update, is that something that's being looked at beyond those? Yes, the little interactions do count, but are you, as AT, looking at how do we get better at that stuff too?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, absolutely, and it is a key part of the AT way. There's a subset which is called the delivery way, and in particular it's looking back at all of the projects that we have on currently and making sure that where there has been support previously given either by communities or local boards, that when we go to reconsult or even start delivery of that project, that support still remains. Some of our projects are coming on board well after the time, and that's why sometimes they've been seen as a surprise. And so, yes, absolutely, that's an area that Murray and the team in particular, working with Dan Lambert, have a focus on. And it is part of our work stream for this quarter and then going into the next financial year. So, yes, this is probably the easiest way of answering.
Thank you, appreciate that. And that point about the long lag sometimes between consultation on something and implementation is well made. Can I suggest, Chair, that we have either in a future quarterly or monthly update or a workshop or just a briefing on where they're up to with the AT way? I think that would be really useful. That's me, thank you.
Thank you. Wayne.
Sure. This is the only question I'm asking today, Mr. Chair, and I'll be fairly quick. So it goes to ferries across Auckland, and my question is around when will there be a status report going to the Auckland Transport Board that updates the board, and obviously I would expect it comes back to us, on the status of the ferry fleet, the status of the ferries being built, and that includes the 100% electric, the hybrids, refurbishment and the like. I've been asking for this report for, it's approaching 2 years now. There is some urgency. I certainly receive information from the industry that there are very significant cost overruns, that there may be ferries, particularly those subject to the shovel-ready project, where the government tipped in a significant amount of money, that may be undeliverable. There are significant concerns in the industry around whether ferries are going to be fit for purpose, the capital cost of the ferries, the operational cost, which has a huge impact going forward, the alternatives that are available that are being put up by industry players, often together with funding, and frankly they're not getting anywhere. So at some point it is critical that we have an update, because there's a lot of bad stuff happening, There's a lack of transparency, and it's going to impact on what happens going forward massively. So when is the board going to have that report in the first instance?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Look, I do think we have given frequent updates at the Transport Resilience and Infrastructure Committee. Periodically we have. I mean, they haven't been extensive, but we've definitely given updates. Your question's timely though. We are taking some information to the AT board in June, and so I suggest that we update the committee in July. Yeah.
Well, that would be great, and that report that we receive needs to be sufficiently informed so we can make decisions. And if there are decisions that need to be made that go to contracts and ditching contracts so that we can move forward across a ferry fleet that actually works and is reliable and is cost effective, then those decisions need to be made. I have a huge concern around this, Mr. Chair. There are parts of the Auckland community that are heavily reliant on ferries. They would like better services, and they're very concerned around the non-delivery of ferries going forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, no further questions. Thank you, team. Great to see you here, and thanks for everything. Always a tough gig. Any debate? Morris.
Not a debate, but I couldn't use it as a question. I just wanted to let people know that I got hung out to dry by my own stupidity. In 1994, after we just passed the Maritime Transport Bill, which was a 600-page bill, I actually answered a question in public about what coastal shipping could operate and what couldn't. I got one of the clauses wrong when I answered the question. I got told by the Solicitor General within about half an hour that my advice would breach the law, and I had to go and do a clean-up in aisle 9. So just because you're a minister and just because you answer a question doesn't mean it's the law. The law is the law, and unfortunately the clean-up can be a bit messy.
Thank you. Mike.
Yes, this item in some ways relates very much to the previous item 8 that we discussed before lunch. There's a real concern here in terms of our public transport effort in particular. Obviously, public transport is vitally important for a whole lot of reasons, but not the least the cost of OPEX and CAPEX we are faced with nowadays. I'm concerned that this council and its predecessors, including the ARC, but not just the ARC, achieved a lot of momentum with public transport patronage. For instance, rail, which was about 2 million passengers per year in year 2000, up until the COVID pandemic struck Auckland. We were over 21 million passengers per year on rail. The other modes as well. For some reason, and when it comes to public transport, and even active modes, if you like, we haven't recovered from the effects of COVID, put it that way. I don't think it has anything really to do with COVID, but it's kind of, in some ways, a sort of long COVID when it comes to public transport. So back in 2019, we had 100 million passenger trips per year, 72.4 million trips per year by bus. That's now down to 68.1 million trips per year. Rail, 21.3 million. That's down to 13.8 million. Ferries around about the same, interestingly enough. But the other change, the other unhelpful change, an ominous change, is that costs, with a decline of some 11%, in our total patronage. The costs in terms of OPEX is up by a third. That is a real concern. So coming back to the feedback from the previous item, the SOI and measures, I think it's important that this committee does engage very seriously indeed with this problem and comes up and suggests measures to break this cycle of failure. I believe that our services are now virtually totally run by bus services at least, and ferry by offshore corporates, investment companies, strangely enough. And I think dealing with them and those costs by upping the fares is self-defeating, and it acts as a block on restoring any momentum in just restoring what we had before. We've talked before about what we now consider unrealistic objectives, 550 million passenger trips per year by year 2030, 17% of mode share by cycles by 2030. It was and still is about 1%. And coming even in a more local aspect or focus, 25,000 passengers per hour coming out of the Karanga-Ahape rail station, so we say. These things are unrealistic in themselves, but it's absolutely vital that we get back to where we actually were and then build on that, and we're a long way from doing that. So I'm critical of AT, of course. I'm also critical of this council. This council also has a role in this, and if we have this problem, if we are in a fix, we all have to work together to try and solve it, and that is absolutely vital. I just want to say one more thing about AT, and actually it's a positive thing, so I hope everyone's sitting down. I want to thank AT for the way they responded during the statutory road closing, road stopping process, which is a process under the Local Government Act and the Public Works Act, in responding to the concerns of the adjoining owners and coming up with a compromise that the adjoining owners and business people are happy to live with. It's not what they wanted, but they accept the compromise. So well done to AT. AT, unfortunately, is coming under a lot of pressure to resile from that agreement, and I'm sure they won't. But it's ironic that AT has done the right thing and gets this sort of criticism, which I don't think is fair or reasonable or actually informed in terms of what the legal obligations of a road authority is under the law of this country. So AT did the right thing, so I thank them for that. The other thing I'd like to say positively about AT is that the response to complaints from my constituents from management has certainly improved in recent months, so thank you for that. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Quite all right. Something you don't see every day. Shane.
It's a green light for you, not a red
Green
light.
light. That's lovely. Oh, thank you, Councillor Walker. That's very nice. Yeah, look, just real quickly, because I wanted to speak about the lower than expected public transport patronage data, and to firstly point out that it's not actually that low, it's just under it. So before we're writing headlines about that, that's very important to note. And I also sort of got out of it that we've got a bit of a triple hit here. So safety rightfully needs emphasis, and it was emphasised by staff as well. And I just want to offer my sort of thoughts to everyone that's been affected by the high-profile kind of incidents that have happened over the past year or so. So that is definitely one issue. Not saying it's not. The second issue is rail. And that seems to be a sticky problem because for the public perception, that's become a real issue where closures and reliability issues has led to a perception that you can't trust the rail system. And as someone in my ward that has rail and buses now, which is pretty cool, you can kind of see a bit of a contrast in the public mood, and people are really loving the WX1. It's a huge, huge success. And with the rail, the first thing you ask a West Aucklander about with rail, they will tell you, look, I don't know if I want to take it, it's late, it doesn't show up, and rah, rah, rah. So that's going to be an issue that's going to survive for a while, but when the CRL comes in, I'm hoping that will turn around. So we're in the midst of a crisis of confidence, but that's only temporary, hopefully. The third is an interesting one for me, and I want to kind of spend more time on it because an area where we can have real influence as decision makers is the cost of public transport on households. So cost of living issues are hitting people in the pockets, unemployment is up, we've heard all this kind of stuff. We can have a direct influence in easing household budgets by taking action on public transport fares. And as a side quest, we can also help our climate and we can provide a good service for Aucklanders as well. The $50 fare cap I'm super duper proud of. I think it was a fantastic initiative, and most people in Auckland would agree, which is really awesome. It's been a runaway success. But I'm sort of just challenging all of us to have a bit of a think. We know that price works as a lever now. The $50 fare cap actually proved that to us. So what's next? What can we do in the future to build on that success and encourage more people onto public transport using the price lever? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Shane. Any other comments? None? Oh, I'll just make one. I mean, I stand to be corrected and be unusual for someone to be able to say something in this room without having hard, solid facts behind them. But my understanding is Melbourne, one of the cities that is held up as one of the great public transport cities in the world, is behind Auckland in terms of recovery from COVID. And so we are actually doing better than one of the great cities that people talk about, and where there is free public transport within parts of the city. So we're not doing too badly, and as someone who uses it every day, I know. I'd be surprised, Mr. Chair. You're leaving. And as someone who uses public transport every day, I don't sense that there's doom and gloom by the people that use it every day. There might be upon people, as often is the way, where people criticise, and they're generally the people that don't use it, and they use it as a justification for not using it. And whereas if they used it every day, they might actually find it's as regular and more trustworthy than maybe getting in a car and sitting on the motorway, as my wife did the other day, and it took 2.5 hours to get from Drury to Epsom. So it took me 55 minutes, happily so, smugly sitting there at night when I got home. So it's not as bad as we hear. It actually works pretty well, and for a little city, which we are worldwide, we actually do a pretty good job. And so, I think we do need to put it in some context. Thank you, Mike. We listen to you quite happily. That being that, we will put it. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. And against? Passed. Thank you. Thank you, AT.